They were warned, not dramatically, not urgently, just casually, the way people warn you about something you won't fully understand until it's too late. New Year here is different. Different was fine. Different was manageable. Different sounded exciting. They smiled when they heard it. They had lived through snowstorms, power outages, quiet countdowns where everyone checked their phones at midnight like it was an appointment. They thought they knew what a big New Year felt like. They did not. They arrived 2 days before New Year's Eve, carrying winter instincts into a city that didn't believe in quiet. Back home, this season meant silence wrapped in tradition. Streets emptied early, voices softened. Celebration was something you planned carefully and ended politely. Manila didn't plan to be polite. The first thing that hit them wasn't the heat. It wasn't the traffic. It wasn't even the chaos. It was the sound. Not noise, sound with intention, laughter that traveled, music that didn't ask permission, voices that overlapped without colliding. The city didn't whisper. It welcomed. The moment they stepped outside the airport, the city closed the distance instantly. Not slowly, not politely, instantly. The air wrapped around them like it had been waiting, warm, thick, buzzing with movement. Motorcycles passed like living things, each with its own rhythm, weaving through traffic with confidence that looked chaotic but somehow wasn't. Vendors called out as people passed, not with impatience, not with urgency, but with smiles in their voices, like everyone was already part of the same conversation. Music floated from corners that didn't look capable of holding speakers, from windows, from alleyways, from moving vehicles. Songs overlapped without clashing, creating a soundtrack that felt improvised and permanent at the same time. Everything moved, everything talked, everything felt alive. They pressed their faces to the car windows, silent now, absorbing it all. Streets that never paused, people who didn't rush but never stopped, laughter slipping through open doors, conversations happening at full volume without tension. Their local friend noticed everything. The wide eyes, the exchanged glances, the small smiles mixed with disbelief. He laughed the entire drive, the kind of laugh that comes from knowing someone is about to experience something they'll never forget. He didn't explain anything. He didn't need to. He just said, "Wait until New Year's Eve." That night, they learned something important. Sleep here was optional. As they lay down, still replaying the day in whispers, the city refused to quiet itself. Somewhere nearby, a voice rose into the darkness, singing with full commitment and zero concern for neighbors, not polished, not careful, emotional, unfiltered. The kind of singing that wasn't trying to impress anyone, only to be felt. The song drifted, stumbled, recovered, climbed again. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. They lay in bed whispering, trying not to laugh too loudly into their pillows. Is this normal? Is there a party? No. That sounds personal. They paused, listening. The voice didn't fade. It grew braver. One of them whispered, barely holding back laughter, "This must be practice." They smiled at the joke, not realizing yet how accurate it was, because this wasn't noise. This was rehearsal, for joy, for chaos, for a night that would make everything they thought they knew about New Year feel very, very small. The next day, they were introduced to Filipino food. They thought they were prepared. They were not. The table didn't fill dramatically at first. It happened casually, almost politely. A pot of rice appeared. Then another. Plates followed, bowls, containers, dishes arriving one by one, each placed down with a quiet confidence, like this was all completely normal. Rice appeared first, then more rice, then dishes with colors they didn't expect and smells that made them pause halfway between curiosity and caution. They leaned in. They pointed. They asked questions they weren't sure how to pronounce. They tried everything. Fried things that crackled when bitten. Saucy things that demanded rice, sweet things pretending to be savory, Savory things that surprised them by being sweet. They exchanged looks after every bite, silently negotiating how honest their reactions should be. Then they saw the spaghetti. It sat there confidently, bright and familiar-looking, like it belonged, like it had always belonged. They stared at it quietly. "This is dessert?" someone asked carefully, genuinely unsure. "No," came the confident answer without hesitation. "That's spaghetti." They looked at each other again. They took a bite. Silence, not the awkward kind, the processing kind, then laughter, then confusion, then another bite. Slower this time, more thoughtful. It wasn't bad. It was comforting. It was just unexpected. Sweet, but not wrong. By the third bite, one of them nodded seriously, as if arriving at an important conclusion, and said, "I don't understand it, but I respect it." That became the theme of the trip. They learned quickly that food here wasn't optional. It wasn't just fuel. It was communication, an invitation, a declaration of care. Saying "eat" was the same as saying "you're welcome here." Saying "later" meant someone would check on you again. Plates weren't suggestions. They were challenges. Everywhere they went, someone insisted they eat more. Not forcefully, gently, persistently, like it was their responsibility. Just a little, they were told, smiling. It was never a little, and somehow, no matter how full they thought they were, there was always room for one more bite. As New Year's Eve approached, Manila shifted. Not suddenly, not with announcements. It just changed. Decorations appeared overnight, like the city had decided together that it was time. Lights wrapped around poles, banners hung where there had been nothing the day before. Fireworks stands multiplied on street corners, popping up like they had been waiting all year for permission to exist. Children tested noisemakers early, laughing uncontrollably at how loud they could go. They ran back and forth, competing with each other, already celebrating something that hadn't officially begun. Back home, New Year's Eve was elegant, controlled, serious. People dressed carefully, voices softened. Midnight was treated with respect. You didn't rush toward it. You approached it calmly. Here, it felt like the city was preparing for battle, with silence. On the morning of December 31st, they woke up to explosions. Not distant ones, not gentle ones. Firecrackers. Sharp, sudden, close. At 9 in the morning. One of them shot up in bed, heart racing, eyes wide, reaching for a phone in panic. "Is it midnight?" "No," came the relaxed reply from the other side of the room, barely awake. "People are warming up." There was a pause. "Warming up? For what?" "For later." They lay back down, listening as another crack echoed outside, followed by laughter. Whatever later meant, it was clearly important. They didn't understand yet, but they were about to. The day unfolded in confusion and anticipation. There was no clear schedule, no formal preparation, just instructions delivered casually, as if everyone already understood what was coming. They were told to wear comfortable clothes, colorful clothes, clothes they didn't mind smelling like smoke. They laughed at that, exchanging amused looks, assuming it was an exaggeration. A joke, a bit of local humor meant to scare visitors. They would understand later. By late afternoon, the house began to fill. Not all at once. Gradually, naturally. Relatives arrived first, greeting each other loudly like they had been waiting all day for this moment. Neighbors followed, stepping in without knocking. Then friends of friends, introduced quickly and treated immediately like family. Everyone brought food, bags, containers, trays wrapped in foil. No one asked where to put anything. Things were placed wherever there was space. When there wasn't space, more space somehow appeared. Tables expanded, chairs multiplied, plates stacked higher and higher. Something stood out almost immediate. No one was stressed. Cooking happened mid-conversation, hands moving automatically while stories overlapped. Children ran freely between adults, laughing, shouting, disappearing, and reappearing without anyone panicking. Someone spilled something on the floor and laughed instead of apologizing. Another person cleaned it up without comment. Music played constantly, switching from upbeat songs to sentimental ones to karaoke classics without warning. Nobody complained. Nobody adjusted the volume. One of them leaned over, voice low, eyes scanning the room, and whispered, "This feels alive." As night fell, the city began to tease them. Small flashes appeared in the distance. Not full fireworks yet, just hints, just reminders. The sky flickered briefly, then went dark again. The air changed, carrying the smell of smoke, food, and anticipation all at once. They stepped outside just before midnight, curious, excited, wanting to see what would happen. That was their mistake. The countdown started somewhere. Not from one place, not from one voice. Somewhere behind them, somewhere above them, somewhere down the street. Everywhere, nowhere. It didn't matter, because before they could even locate it, the city exploded. Fireworks didn't just fill the sky. They burst from rooftops, cracked open from streets, shot upward from balconies. Light came from every direction at once. Red, green, gold, white, colors colliding without apology. The sound wasn't distant. It was physical. It slammed into their chests before their ears could catch up. Vibrations ran through the ground, through their legs, through their ribs. The air itself felt alive, shaking, laughing with them. One of them screamed, not in fear, but in pure, uncontrollable joy. They laughed immediately after, the kind of laughter that happens when your body doesn't know how else to react. Hands flew to ears, eyes widened, hearts raced faster than the countdown ever could. This wasn't delicate beauty. This wasn't something you admired quietly. It was loud, proud, unapologetic. Fireworks overlapped. Some fizzled early. Others exploded too close, too bright, too bold. Nobody flinched. Nobody complained. People cheered like each blast was a personal victory. Hands appeared everywhere. Someone pressed grapes into their palms. Someone else shouted for them to jump. Coins were pushed into pockets. Laughter drowned out instructions they barely understood. They were told everything. They were told nothing. They stopped asking which tradition belonged to what belief. They stopped trying to organize meaning. They just followed. They jumped. They laughed. They ate. They hugged strangers whose names they didn't know and didn't need to. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. The fireworks didn't slow. If anything, they grew bolder. One of them shouted over the noise, half laughing, half shouting, "Is it still New Year?" "Yes," came the answer instantly, confidently. "Until the noise stops." It didn't. And somewhere between another explosion and another laugh, something quiet happened. One of them realized she wasn't thinking anymore. No worries, no plans, no past waiting for him, no future pulling him forward. Just noise, just people, just laughter spilling out faster than it could be contained. Just now. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. Later, when the noise finally softened, when the explosions became echoes and the sky slowly returned to darkness, people drifted back inside as if nothing unusual had happened. Plates were passed around again. Leftovers appeared, warm and comforting, somehow tasting better than they had hours before. Someone leaned back, still smiling, still catching their breath, and said quietly, almost to themselves, "I've never felt this free on New Year." No one argued. No one needed to. Sleep came late, not because they tried to stay awake, but because the night refused to end neatly. Conversations stretched. Laughter returned in waves. Someone sang again, softer this time. When sleep finally arrived, it came suddenly and deeply. Morning came loud. January 1st felt wrong. Back home, this day was quiet, sacred, silent. People slept in, Voices stayed low. Reality crept back gently, like it didn't want to disturb anything. Here, reality didn't return at all. Pots clanked in the kitchen. Someone laughed loudly at nothing in particular. A radio played cheerful music like midnight had never ended. The smell of food drifted through the house, heavy and comforting, pulling them awake before they were ready. "Why are they cooking again?" It came out half as a joke, half as genuine concern. They checked the time. Morning. Breakfast looked suspiciously like another feast. Fresh rice, fried things, something sweet, something with eggs, no signs of slowing down. Before anyone could ask a question, plates were handed out. "Eat," they were told gently, like it was the most natural thing in the world. They exchanged tired smiles, still overwhelmed, still amused, and slowly, without anyone needing to explain it, they were starting to understand. They went out again. Not cautiously, not reluctantly. Again. The mall was full, more alive than they expected it to be. Families everywhere, children running ahead of parents, couples walking slowly, talking, laughing, everyone dressed like the day itself was worth celebrating, not recovering from. There was laughter in every direction, movement without urgency, an energy that didn't match the chaos of the night before, yet somehow came from the same place. People smiled easily as they passed. Some asked where they were from. Others just nodded politely, like it was enough to acknowledge them. No one stared. No one made them feel out of place. They were treated like something familiar. Later that evening, the setting changed again. A smaller space. Louder voices. Music playing from someone's phone. Conversations overlapping without concern for order. Then, without warning, a microphone was placed into one of their hands. Karaoke. They froze. They laughed nervously, looked at each other for help. They tried to refuse. It didn't work. Encouragement came quickly, smiles, clapping, someone counting down. They sang, badly, loudly, without coordination. Lyrics were forgotten and replaced with laughter. One of them stopped halfway through, laughing too hard to continue. Another tried to hum the melody and missed it completely. The room erupted in applause anyway. Not polite applause, real applause. That's when it clicked. This culture didn't celebrate perfection. It didn't reward performance. It celebrated participation. You didn't need to be good. You just needed to be there. The days blurred together. Not in a rushed way, in a soft way. They stopped keeping track of which day it was. Mornings began whenever someone woke up. Plans changed without apology. Nobody seemed bothered by it. Somehow, everything still worked. They rode crowded transport for the first time, pressed shoulder to shoulder with strangers who didn't feel like strangers for long. Someone made space without being asked. Someone laughed when a stop was missed. Nobody complained. They tried street food cautiously at first, watched how others ordered, followed instructions they barely understood, then ate standing up, laughing at themselves, surprised at how quickly caution turned into enthusiasm. They laughed with strangers, real laughter, the kind that doesn't need background or explanation. Small jokes, shared reactions, quick conversations that felt oddly personal for how short they were. Invitations came without schedules. Later, maybe tonight. Come if you want. Time bent around people, not clocks. If someone was late, nobody checked the time. If plans changed, nobody apologized. What mattered was who showed up, not when. They noticed something else, too. They weren't reaching for their phones as often. They weren't checking messages back home every few minutes. They weren't thinking about what came next. They were just present. One night, sitting outside after another long evening of food and conversation, someone finally said it out loud. "I think Filipino New Year broke something in me." There was a pause, not awkward, thoughtful. He stared at the ground for a second, then shook her head and smiled. No, it fixed something. Everyone laughed, but they knew what he meant, because something had shifted. They felt lighter, less guarded, more willing to speak without rehearsing, more comfortable laughing loudly, even badly, more open to being included instead of standing back. They hadn't planned on changing. They came for warmth, for color, for a break from winter. They didn't expect to feel different inside. And somewhere in the blur of meals, laughter, and unstructured time, they realized that this new year hadn't just been something they celebrated. It had quietly rearranged the way they understood joy. By the final days, they stopped counting time. Not because time disappeared, but because it stopped mattering. They didn't wake up wondering what day it was anymore. They woke up wondering who they would see next, what they would eat, what unexpected conversation might happen before the day ended. They counted moments instead, moments measured in shared meals, in laughter that came easily, in small routines that somehow felt important, even though they had only existed for a few days. On their last morning, they sat quietly together, watching the city wake up one more time. The sounds were familiar now, comforting, no longer overwhelming. One of them spoke softly, almost afraid to say it out loud. "I'm scared to go home." It wasn't said with drama, just honesty. Not because home was bad, not because anything was wrong, but because this felt human. The farewell didn't feel formal. It wasn't rushed. It came the way everything else here had come, naturally, with food laid out one last time, with laughter mixed into the goodbyes, with simple words of gratitude spoken like they mattered. In that moment, they realized something clearly. They hadn't visited a country. They had been included in a life. Back home, snow returned, silence returned. Familiar routines found their places again, but something stayed. They laughed more easily now, reached out more often, invited people over without waiting for reasons, celebrated small things, ordinary things, just because. And every new year after that, when midnight arrived quietly, without explosions or chaos, they remembered Manila, the noise, the food, the joy, and the way a city halfway across the world taught them something simple and unforgettable. Celebration isn't about the calendar. It's about choosing to be together,